Good evening, everyone. My name is Ringmi Gindoan, and I'm going to report about cell membrane and transport mechanism. So first is we will define what is cell membrane. So cell membrane, or plasma membrane, is a thin semi-permeable membrane that surrounds the cytoplasm of the cell. So it surrounds the cytoplasm of the cell. It is a thin, semi-permeable membranes. So its function is to protect the integrity of the interior of the cell by allowing certain substances in the cell while keeping other substances out. So the function of the cell membrane, it protects the integrity of the interior of the cell by siya ang nag-allow sa certain substances to enter the cell, and then some is to siya po yung nagkuan to out to keep other substances out of the cell. So the plasma membrane or cell membrane has many functions, but the most basic one is to define the borders of the cell and keep the cell functionally. So the plasma membrane is selectively permeable. So this means that the membrane allows some materials to freely enter or leave the cell while other materials cannot move rapidly. So here is the cell membrane or the fluid mosaic model. So the fluid mosaic model, it is the model that was proposed on 1890s, and its chemical components were described in 1915. The principal components identified at that time were lipids and protein. So the first widely accepted model of the plasma membrane structure was proposed in 1935 by Hodge Davison and James Daniel. It was based on the railroad track, so appearance of the plasma membrane in early electronic micrograms. So during that time, the cell membranes often described by the fluid mosaic model. So in the fluid mosaic model, the proteins embedded in a phospholipid bilayers. So this model is a dynamic and flexible structure surrounded by the cell. So according to this model, the membrane is composed primarily of a phospholipid bilayer with protein embedded within it. Okay, so this is the cell membrane. So phospholipid one head, and a phospholipid is composed of two, one head and two tails. So polar head attracted water or the hydrophilic. It is found at the top, and the non-polar traits refilled water is kaning naa diri, kaning sa ubos kanang murag duha ka nagsanga mo na siya ang hydrophobic. So phospholipid binary, the cell membrane is mainly made up of, as what I have said, two layers of phospholipid. Each phospholipid has hydrophilic. So meaning hydrophilic, it is water attracting or the head, and two hydrophobic, so the water refilling tail. So this is the head, kanang makita nyo nga naay murag bukol-bukol sa taas, and the tail is kanang duha ka buok na murag sanga. In the bilayer, the hydrophobic tails face inwards. So naka-face siya inwards and shielded from water, while the hydrophilic heads face outward, intending so silbigaan na sila. So ang hydrophobic tails face inwards and shield from water. So while the hydrophilic heads face outwards, interacting with the aqueous environment inside and outside the cell. So the fluid mosaic model, so back here, so the fluid mosaic model described the membrane as a fluid flexible structures where the lipids and proteins can move laterally. The term mosaic refers to the patchworks of protein that are scattered throughout the phospholipid bilayer. This protein can vary in type of functions, including transport protein, receptors, and enzymes. So next is this is the structures of the two bilayers. So as we can see here, this is the outside of the cell membrane, and this is the inside. So this is the lipid bilayers, a kilid, and then the non-polar fatty acid chain. So this is the phosphopolar lipids. Phosphopolar heads. So muna siya agatong head sa polar sa phospholipid, and then this is the tail. So ana sila. Naay sa outside, napoy sa inside, but ilang mga tail is nag-abot sa tunga. Okay, so the proteins embedded within this layer can either sponge the membrane. So makasponge siya sa membrane into integral proteins or be attached or its surface. So the peripheral proteins, these proteins play a crucial role in various cellular functions, such as the transporting substance across the membrane, receiving signals, and facilitating communication between cells. So overall, the fluid mosaic model highlights the cell's membrane dynamic natures, where components are in constant motion, allowing for feasibility and adaptability in cell membrane. So cell membrane, so cell surface proteins, so channel proteins, so transport food and other molecules into the cell and transport waste out of the cell. So as what I have said, cell membrane, its function is to allow protein or molecules to come inside the cell, and some are getting out, or or silbi itapon niya ang waste. So mo siya ang borders. It's muna yung functions, and the cell transport waste out of the cell. So next muna siya ang channel protein, and then next is the receptors protein. So there are many types of protein, and this is the works and kinds of proteins. So the receptors protein is it gathers information about the cell's surroundings. So ang receptors protein is muna siya ang gather of information from the cell's surroundings. So next is the cell surface markers. So identify the type of cell important for cell recognition. So a cell surface marker, its function is to identify the type of cell and the importance of cell recognition. So next is the cell membrane. So permeability of the cell membrane. So semi-permeable, selectively permeable it means that only certain substances can pass across the membrane in the semi-permeable. Second is the factors that determine whether a molecule can pass through a membrane or not. So based on the size and type, polar or non-polar. So next is the transport mechanism. So the transport mechanisms, moving materials in and out of the cells. So by transporting mechanisms, it is the moving of materials in, pasulod, and then out of the cell. So concentration gradients. So the concentration gradients, the difference, it means that the difference in the amount of substances inside and outside of the cell. Going with the gradients, moving from high to low concentration, going against the gradients, so moving from low to high concentration, and then the equilibrium exists with the concentration of molecules is the same throughout a space, inside and outside the cells. So, and next is the transport mechanism. So the transport mechanisms have two categories of transport based on concentration gradients and the needs for energy. So one is the passive transport that doesn't require energy, goes with the gradient. So example is the diffusion and osmosis. So next is the active transport, requires energy, goes against the gradients. So passive transport mechanism, so diffusions. So when we say diffusions, it is the movements from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So again, the diffusion, it is the movements of an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. Siya ang diffusions. So one of an example of this is smoke across a room, food coloring drop into water, oxygen in the lungs. So it is movements of high concentration into an area of low concentration. That is an example. So next is passive transport mechanism. So the passive transport mechanism, second is the osmosis, so diffusions of water. So water will flow from a hypotonic solution to a hypertonic solution. So will water move in a isotonic solution? Yes, but it won't be noticeable equilibrium to establish. established. So next is the passive transport mechanism again. So in osmosis, diffusions of water, so directions of osmosis, the direction of water flow depends upon the concentration on solute and solvent water. So tonicity, term used to compare two solutions, usually the inside and the outside of the cell. So hypotonic, less solute or more water. Muna siya ang hypotonic. And then a hypertonic is more solute, less water. An isotonic is equal amount of solute and water. So hypotonic again is the less solute or more water. And then hypertonic is more solute, less water. So still be opposite. And then sa isotonic is equal amount of solute and water. So next is the passive transport. Again, there is also an example. Water will flow an hypotonic solution to a hypertonic solution. So water move in isotonic solution, yes, but it won't be noticeable. Equilibrium is established. So again, ang isotonic is katong equal ra ang ilang amount sa solute and amount of water. Okay, so passive transport mechanism. So osmosis, diffusions of water. So torque or pressure, osmotic pressure, pressure due to water in cells. So analogy, air pressure in a tire. So when a cell has high turgor pressure, it is bigger and stiffer. When a cell has low turgor pressure, it is smaller and flimsy. So passive transport mechanism. So plasmolysis, welting of a cell due to the loss of turgor pressure. So cytolysis, bursting of a cell due to an increase in torture pressure. So how do plant cells avoid cytolysis? Cell walls, because of the cell wall. So they can avoid cytolysis. So unsa itong cytolysis? Bursting of a cell due to an increase in turgor pressure. So next is how do unicellular freshwater organisms avoid bursting? Contractile vacuoles. Okay, so this is the passive transport mechanism. So when a cell is placed in a distilled water, so the cell will be swelled or mudako siya or muburot siya, and then mabuto siya or mabush. And then when a cell is placed in a concentrated salt solution, it will cells shrink and shrivel. To silbi ma-deform siya into mura siya og kanang kuan sa mura siya ni naay tunok-tunok kung ibutang ang cell sa salt solution. Okay, so this is the passive transport mechanism in the cell walls. This is the nucleus, the cell wall, and then plasma membrane, cytoplasm, and vacuoles. So when the cell wall or the cell wall is placed, the plant cell placed in the distilled water, so cells stiffen but generally retains shape. So when we say stiffen, this is it will be become stronger or tumitigas. That is the definition of stiffens. And when the plant cell placed in concentration of salt solution, cell body shrink and pulls away from cell wall. It will sink and then mo-pull away siya sa cell wall. So matanggal siya sa cell wall. And the next is the passive transport mechanism, so facilitating diffusion. So transport of specific molecules across a membrane with the help of channel protein. An example of a molecule that is often transported in this manner is glucose. So next is the active transport mechanism. So the active transport mechanism requires energy in the form of ATP. What is the meaning of ATP? Adenosine triphosphate. Then next is the sodium potassium bump sodium ions out and force potassium ions in importance for conduction, nerve impulses, and muscle contraction. This is the sodium potassium pump. Look at the illustration. So first is dari ang ATP. It needs ATP, extracellular fluid. And then kini na din siya dira ang ATP is nabutang na siya og P, as you notice sa Sa second, third naman din second kani o ADP. ADP ano siya, ang ATP is diri ATP to ATP ang sa first step. Second is ang P is na siya sa diri sa babaan o sa lubutan dapit, then ang ATP then ang inside of the cell. This is the inside of the cell and this is the fluid outside, I think. This is the inside of the cell, the P and ADP and the ATP. So that is the structures of active transport mechanism by sodium potassium pump. Pump na. And then active transport mechanism. So proton pumps transport protons through membranes of chloroplast and mitochondria. This is the proton pumps example of active transport. This is the illustration. So next is the active transport mechanism. So endocytosis, the process of bringing larger molecules into the cell of engulfing them. So when we say engulfing, the meaning of engulfing is probitag iyang masulod sa iya or iyang tunlon or iswallow niya. It is so endocytosis, it is the opposite or kabaliktaran siya sa unsa man sa exocytosis. So ang endocytosis, it is process of bringing larger molecules into the cell. So phagocytosis liquid. So phagocytosis solid, pinocytosis liquid, phagocytosis solid. Amphibious eat this way. White blood cells engulf bacteria. So next is the exocytosis, so discharge of waste. So kung sa kuan is isulod niya ang endocytosis, so sila ipasulod niya ang mga molecules sa cell into the cell by engulfing, so magtunlon or ipasulod niya. While ang exocytosis, it is the transport of discharging a waste, hormones or other larger molecules out of the cell. Opposite, as what I have said, it is opposite of endocytosis. Then how cells communicate. So organ system involved in communication. So first is the endocrine system. So the endocrine system, it releases hormones, protein for communication. And the nervous system, it releases neurotransmitters to other nerve cells or to muscle cells. Next is how cells, so is the receptors. So receptors are proteins that are or the cell's membrane surface. So they send message to the inside of the cell when they encountered certain molecules outside of the cell. Silbi si receptors mo'y mag-send og message inside the cell kung maka-encounter sila og mga certain molecules nga outside sa cell. So next is the chemical gate channel. So the chemical triggers transmitted information. So the chemical gate channels, so gate channels mo to siya ang mag-trigger sa pag-transmit og chemical information. And then next is the voltage gate channel. An electrical signal transmit information along nerve cells. So ang voltage gate channel is mo ni siya ang mag-transmit og information dito along sa nerve cells or electrical signals mo ni siya. So that's all of my report. Thank you for listening and watching.